Welcome to the Kawartha Small Business Podcast, where we believe the Kawarthas can be the most thriving region in Canada for small business. I'm Brian Rump from Profit Coach.
And I'm Matt Garrity of Managing Digital.
Before we get started, head over to kawarthasmallbusinesspodcast.ca/checklist and download Matt and Brian's marketing checklist for Kawartha small businesses. All right, today, Matt, we are talking about marketing like we usually do, but we're intentionally going to talk about it. But our spin is going to be that I want to break down how marketing is economics in action. You like to joke that economics makes me fun at parties. I say this often about, marketing's economics in action, but what does that really mean? It kind of means a lot of things. Sometimes it's a thought or something that'll hit me. And I thought we'd just take an episode to maybe explore a few of those concepts. It won't be exhaustive by any means, but I think it helps us understand that, marketing or economics does have a place in marketing. It's not some obscure thing that you might get through a class on, but has nothing to do with, anything at all.
Yeah, I think everything that we do business wise can be tied back to finances and I guess economics, whether it's customer service, marketing, literally anything, innovation. But marketing is one of maybe the few, and I could probably be corrected immediately, but marketing is maybe one of the few where we can tangibly tie back marketing efforts versus like what we got economically out of it or whatever, if that's making any sense.
Yeah. So I think, when we talk about economics, it's not just about money. It's about, kind of how the world works, the transferring of resources, how looking at how wealth is created. So, all of those things. We're looking at managing scarce resources, which is marketing sometimes. Sometimes we have a resource that's scarce, so it's how we're managing it. Sometimes we have an abundance of a resource, but we want to try to make it look like it's scarce so people buy it. So when we talk about microeconomics, and I'm gearing up to teach some microeconomics this summer, and a lot of students are always like, why do we have to take this class? This has nothing to do with my program. My favorite is when people are like, I'm in human resources. What does economics have to do with that? And what's funny about it is it's called like human resources, and you're dealing with resources that are like people. So it's all about economics, really, when it comes down to it. It's supply and demand and how people respond. And I think marketing just plays right into so many of those concepts.
That's interesting. I feel super out of my wheelhouse, so I'm just going to throw it back to how does marketing and economics play a part of this? Do you have to talk about economics first?
No, I think I'm just going to talk about a couple of concepts, and we'll see where the conversation goes. So one is the concept of margin and marginal. And in economics, we're often talk about people who are on the margin. So, if we look at the basics of like a supply and demand curve, and when they change that supply and demand, it usually changes based on sort of small incremental changes. So marginal means one more. So, what's the impact of a marginal change in price? So if I raise my, prices $1, is that going to lower demand? Sort of in a perfect market with no other obstacles at play or factors at play, which isn't always real. That's kind of like doing stuff in a vacuum. But marketing is very much like that. We're kind of experimenting all the time. And where the margin is typically it's people who, maybe they want to buy from you. They have the ability to buy from you. For some reason, they're not. So you do something marginal that makes them buy from you. There's always people sort of who are buying at you for whatever the price is, kind of whatever they're seeking you out and buying that. So where my mind goes with marginal is in marketing, you and I have a lot of conversations with people who say things like, oh, I don't need marketing. Right? I get lots of referrals or word of mouth, or people just find me anyway. And that relates to economics, because most of what we're doing in marketing is to get more people on that margin, right? So we're trying to raise our sales from the margins, not from the sort of pool of people who are buying from us anyway. Because there's always going to be people who hunt you down and somehow manage to find you, even if you're hard to find. There's always going to be some word of mouth, but you're doing marketing to find those extra people who don't know about you, and you're putting something in front of them that provides that incentive for them to take action.
Yeah, for sure. Now I feel like I could say 100,000 things, which is good. The one thing I will say is marketing is an exercise in testing. Like you just mentioned, we're never going to get it perfect immediately right out of the gate. You're not going to get it perfect after a month. It's not going to be perfect after 6 months. Realistically, it maybe is never going to be perfect. And that's just something we need to remove from our heads.
Yeah.
What we're doing weekly, monthly, maybe daily, depending on certain situations, is you are making extremely small changes every time you do something. Whether it's ads, email, search engines, social media, maybe a bit more prevalent within ads and email, making those little changes every single time. Email, for instance, every single time you're sending out an email, I'm looking at the subject line to figure out, like, how can we improve the open rate of an email, even by 1% or 2%, and then maybe turning this full circle on what you're kind of talking about, which is, what does it mean if we had 1% more people actually opening that email up? Do we know what that information is? Or, like, how can that help us? It sounds like 1% isn't a big win, but when we're talking marketing, 1% is huge. I don't think most people realize, like, most successful marketers are going to be generating opportunities and leads for people like 4% of the time. That's like slightly above average.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about increasing that to like 5% or 6%, that doesn't sound like that person might be very successful, but from a marketing perspective and numbers perspective, that could be a huge difference. It could be a sale. That sale to you could be $100 or it could be $20,000.
Yeah. And what's really cool about this is, like, why I want to talk about fighting in the margins, is it's those little things that you change, right? So if I get 1% of people more opening my emails, that could lead to a lot more sales, or that could be the difference between me breaking even and actually having a decent profit. And your profit in business comes from the margins like that. You got to cover your overhead, you got to cover all your material costs. So there's like all of these things that we're fighting and trying to sort of earn, and then it comes from the margins. In the U.S. we have it's bigger in Canada now, but like Black Friday sales, and the whole thing was, in the old days, or the myth that, like, that's the day you're now in the black for like your whole year of sales, right? So it's like till the end of November, you're losing money. And then, what you make between end of November and end of December is kind of your profit for the year, which is probably a very profitable company. And it's just a way of thinking about that. But that's like the margins, right? It's why, hey, we'll do a sale here to bring in more cash. And we're trying to marginally increase our profits.
I had no idea that's why they called it Black Friday. That's interesting.
Yeah, so that's a thing that happens. And, again, fighting in the margins. So when you're a small business especially, like, you're not doing marketing for survival. And this is something I was thinking about a few weeks ago, because a lot of people resist doing repetitive, like, active marketing. And they're like, I don't need it, right? But you're not getting it for survival. It's to build a business long term, and it's to fight in those margins. So if you're a coffee shop and you need people through your door, you're trying to get a few more people through the door in an hour, maybe that's your metric. And those extra few people, that's where all your profits going to be, because you've already paid for everything. Or you're trying to get that one extra sale in a week, and that's the where you're going to make your profit. So you're not doing marketing for everyone, or you're not targeting the people who are coming anyway. You're targeting that one extra person, that marginal sale, and you're always doing that.
Yeah, maybe email marketing is one of the better examples of it, because I always think about how much email marketing sucks because people have been on the receiving end of, I don't know if it's terrible email
It's
marketing.
usually terrible.
It's terrible.
I know I open emails that are interesting to me.
But you think about it's the clothing retailers usually. They'll email you every day.
Because they just blast you. And for them, it's just a pure numbers game. And the other cool thing about this, when you talk about margins, some of those bigger retailers are the ones who are skating on the margins every day. And they're so desperate. Because we're watching big retail close down. We're watching those big chains in stores just go bankrupt, and you're like, what? I love that store. Why are they bankrupt? It's because they're living on the margin, and they're spending so much in marketing to try to get people through their door that it's not a profitable business.
Yeah.
So that's where those fine margins make the difference sometimes between survival and not surviving.
Yeah, like the email marketers, like those clothing retailers, they'll say they just had an email list of 10,000 people, and it's way more than that.
Yeah.
But 10,000 people, if they increase by 1% in open rate, that can end up being 3 or 4 more customers to them. And I don't know what the average sale is. Maybe it's $20, maybe it's $100. That all adds up, and they're just looking for that marginal increase every time.
Yeah, and that's why different activities are important as well. So it's some people are doing email, some people are doing social media. So as a small business, it's hard sometimes to do all the things, but you kind of have to pick some and just try to, find out that marginal sale.
Yeah.
And it's also, if we bridge it to basics like supply and demand and sort of the general thing where, price goes down, demand goes up, people will buy more of it. I think sometimes people will understand that, and they might do things like, well, let's have a sale. That's our problem, right? So then they'll drop their price. But if you don't have enough people who know about it or who are on that margin, then your sales aren't necessarily going to go up, right? I could open a store that nobody knows about and do a 90% off sale, and nothing's going to change because I don't have an audience on those margins. So that's something that, if you have that audience and you can identify that, there's people who want to buy it, but they might buy it at $90 instead of $100. Then you can do an experiment and maybe do a sale, and then people rush in and buy it because there's now an incentive for them to act now, and that's kind of the type of thing you're trying to go for.
I rarely care about what something says marketing-wise, which might come as a shock to a lot of people, like a page of a website, what an ad says, what an email says. And email marketing is probably the most prominent with that for me, because every month when we're making tweaks to emails, it's never about how it's written, never about what words are in the body of it. It's, where does this button go?
Yeah.
What color is this button? What does the button say? That's the extent of it. We, for months with a big account that I've worked on and to great success with the email marketing, basically every month we shift, we change what the button says. It get started, book now. That's all we really do. And then we find out which of these buttons is performing higher, and we'll move it somewhere else on the page.
Yeah.
And every month, we're just making that small tweak here and there. If we make too many changes at once, if we're looking at what the button says, where the images are, what the heading is, then we don't know when we change something what actually has worked. Because now we've made 10 different changes. What we're trying to normally do with email more than anything is isolate, what is it that's actually going to drive the most amount of clicks onto that website.
And that's kind of neat because I think that sort of bridges into another cool thing with marketing and economics, which is the concept of a nudge. So a nudge is behavioral economics because we're dealing with humans. Humans are not purely rational beings. They are messed up in a lot of ways, and in marketing, we can use that to our advantage often, right?
Yeah.
So one of those, a nudge, is pushing people to do something that's right for them anyway.
Mm.
So like that, someone gets an email. It's probably something that they know they want or they need. Maybe there's a reason they haven't done it, but changing the color of the button or the wording or something there makes them click. It's not forcing them to click. It's not some magic
No.
voodoo that's like, why did I even click on this? But it's that nudge to make them click and do something that's probably good for them anyway. So that goes into having a product that's designed well, actually meets the needs of your client. Now that you're knowing about it, and now you're just doing something and trying out those things that make them take that action that's good for them. And these nudges are all about what we call libertarian paternalism. So it's like no one's forcing you to do it. You're still choosing to do it, but it's something that's in your best interest to do.
That's interesting. And yeah, I'm never trying to convince people to click on something. I honestly, as the marketer, I'd prefer that you don't click it unless this is actually going to help you, because realistically, I can turn around and like sell, look how many clicks we got, look at this conversion or whatever. What's going to be important to the people I'm working with is they want good opportunities. And if someone clicked on something because they were tricked into it, that's not a good opportunity for them. They don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah, so a lot of what we're really doing is trying to nudge people.
Yeah.
Especially if, now depending on the business, if you're dealing with something that's like long term, so people will hesitate to take action today on something that's like a long term benefit. So you have to find ways to nudge people into doing it now. One of the better examples of sort of nudges of behavioral economics is things like auto enrolling someone at a company and like the company pension plan. Because a lot of people just won't save for retirement.
Sure.
But if it's like, hey, you joined this company, you're automatically enrolled. You don't have to do it. If you want out, here's like the form to fill out to like get out of it. Most people won't get out of it because they know it's good for them, so they'll do it. But when they have it the other way, where you're being told to like opt in, they just never get around to opting in. So then you'll get people who like work somewhere for 40 years and they never save a dime for retirement because they never opted in to it. So you're just nudging them towards that thing.
Economics is email marketing, because like everything you're talking about, it just reminds me more and more like email marketing, where we have to be concerned about making sure we're not emailing people from 8 to 10, 12 years ago. But at the same time, we need to kind of, once they've interacted with us or reached out to us or worked with us, we need to get them in that queue of emails and talking to them right away. And I have had people that are they'll ask, like, do we need to explicitly send them an email about, like, do you want to continue to receive emails? And I'm like, no, because we're giving them the option immediately to say no. What we do is, like, you make sure you have the unsubscribe button there, which is basically all that is really needed now within your emails. And I say, like, we start emailing them and don't give them that option to click out, because they're gonna probably say no, and you're gonna lose people. So
yeah, like it's thinking about those types of things, right?
Yeah.
So so I think that's like just a really neat one when it comes to like those nudges. You can use those nudges as well in like if you're a retail store, things like just where you place stuff. is nudges as well.
Sure.
You know, one of the best studies was more about food in cafeterias for kids. And it's like, why are kids eating only pizza? And it's like, well, if you only put pizza in front of them,
Yeah.
that's what they're going to eat. But if you put water and apples sort of at the front, easy to get, people are going to make those choices because they're there. But they're not going to reach over the pizza for the apple or the salad. So it's like how you design some of those things is going to, you know, typically guide them to, often it's like more profitable items or things that they kind of want anyway.
Yeah.
We call them impulse items sometimes, or in retail, it's the, you know, what's the $2 sale that gets added on to the $100 sale. And again, that's where your margins are made, right? So that's like sort of combining two of those concepts together.
And this now just reminds me of SEO, search engine optimization, and getting found on Google, where Google puts prevalence on the top of the page versus the bottom. So if you put a bunch of keywords at the top of the page, they think that's more important because as they're reading it as robots, they think that that's way more important than something lower down on the bottom of the page. Like you said, if you're putting all the good stuff up front, they're not going to reach all the way back to the bottom of the page to get that. They care about the things up front at the top of the page.
Yeah, which is cool. So like the robot's been designed for that in mind, and it's also, you know, SEO and getting found.
Yeah.
And also knowing people are going to look at the top, right? Like nobody goes to Google and then jumps to the 20th page to like find stuff, right? They're going with what's easy, right? Because they're on a hunt to solve problems.
There's like a whole presentation here that I think we could pull each of these theories together, and you talk about the economic side, and I can attach like here's the related.
Oh yeah, we could do some of this stuff like all day long.
Yeah,
there's probably 10 episodes here.
Yeah,
because you know, I wrote down just a couple off the top of my head because I didn't want to come in and blast and be like, okay, here's a whole course in, you know, economics and how it relates to marketing.
Everyone thanks you for
business. Yeah. I think, you know, in conclusion, sign up for my microeconomics course because I try to weave these things whenever anyone's like, oh, this is boring. This doesn't relate. Like, no, it does. And like every concept relates. And these are the things like when you're in marketing or business, and when you choose to be in business, you choose to be in marketing, you're trying to do, right? You're fighting on the margins, you're nudging people, you're dealing with, you know, biases that impact us. So one of those biases is people fear loss, and they resist loss more than a gain, right? So you would rather not lose $100 than win $200, for example. So that's, you know, there's a lot of psychological sort of experiments for that, but people don't like losing what they have. So that's why we talk about problems sometimes, and we need to illustrate failure in marketing because you're trying to like have people not experience that loss or not experience their something at their house break down. So you're trying to, you know, instill a little bit of that fear loss, not go too negative, not tick them off and make them go somewhere else, but you want to play on that versus too much gain, right? Because people will do things to present a smaller loss than get a bigger gain.
Yeah, and I guess people will call it now, marketing wise, like to touch on the pain point. Or I was taught originally it was pour salt in the wound.
Yeah,
that's how I refer to it. I still have social media themes that I will pull from where it's called salt and wound, where you're just like specifically
you're agitating the problem.
You're agitating the problem, and from a marketing perspective, and trying to find ways to be like, oh, this is your problem. Here's how it can get a lot worse if you don't utilize what we're trying to sell you.
Yeah, and people fear that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Especially, and this is again linking to things like the nudges. When you are selling a solution that has a long-term benefit, like you have to somehow agitate that short term because otherwise no one's going to take action. And that, you know, back to like the pension and saving for retirement, like that's one of the biggest problems is people don't save for retirement. So financial planners, all sorts of, anyone in the financial industry, for example, if they're doing marketing, they really need to be agitating short-term problems, because otherwise it's always a thing people plan to get around to but never do.
Yeah. Now I'm just worried that I'm not doing this enough.
Yeah, there's a great, I forget if it's a book but a study, but Save More Later. And it's sort of about the automatic increases. So it's like, start with this percentage of your pay getting saved and move to, the next percent, or move up as you earn more. And it's ways basically to just get people to start. And that's like a huge problem, to try to get people to do something that they usually know they're aware they should do, but they just never get around to it. And anyone listening to this probably has now a huge list of like things they probably should get around to.
Yeah.
But like aren't going to go hunting for it. So that's why, a good email sliding into your inbox, presenting that problem, and then making it really easy for you to say, all right, let's get around to that. And click on that is economics in action with your marketing.
And you do hear that a lot, maybe not specifically people saying, oh, I'll get to marketing later, but it does happen more than not when people start a business and like, well, I can't do marketing right now because I just don't have the money for it, or I don't have any income revenue coming into the business. So how can I spend money on it unless I've got money coming in? And that's when people get dependent on referrals, on word of mouth, or I don't know what they're trying to do.
And you need those things too, right? But
absolutely.
You need to fight in the margins quicker on some of that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And like, I can't, I'm preaching to myself, but you can't sell anything or grow your business unless people know that you exist, and that's marketing. And you need to be, if not spending money on marketing, you need to be doing marketing actively. And I'm going to get in a rant. I'm going to stop myself. You can't just rely on like, okay, here's I think I should be marketing, or here's what I think, here's how I like to be marketed to, and here's what I read, and I need to be authentic to my true self. And no, you need to tell people that you exist, and there's ways to do that, and don't mess around with it.
Yeah, it's interesting because this kind of sort of reminds me of, if we're sort of wrapping up soon on our conversation, but when we hear about things like economics and there's like economic theories, one of the coolest things, and it can be frustrating, is like there's not really a exact right way to do something, because otherwise we would do it. So there's some sort of foundational concepts, some sort of laws, for better or for worse, so supply and demand, but we're never in a vacuum. So when I teach, we have a textbook question and it's like a scenario, we're in a vacuum, there's not other formulas. But when you're dealing with humans, there are so many different factors that it's hard to be like, okay, here's a perfect theory and here I'll predict exactly what will happen. So when we get sort of like real economists, sort of the academics who are studying stuff, usually, they will fight about stuff for years before it's like kind of a theory that works. Even then, it can often get disproved a little bit. We often think too much of like the TV economists, which are sometimes just people who took an economics course and now work for a political party and they're trying to push an agenda. But like in marketing, we have the same types of characters. And I think the core of marketing, like economics, is it's something that is always in progress. It's always sort of in action. Activity is important. Experimenting is important. Nothing works perfectly. And if it does, it's not going to work that way for long. So you're always fighting and adjusting on the margins and trying new things.
And I guess to wrap up, not my final thought, but you will often ask me if I have any final thoughts, and then I don't have one because I've exhausted all my decent thoughts, is I think that that's why people are scared to do marketing, maybe. Like you said about people would rather not lose $100 than win $200.
Yeah.
I think that they're scared that they're not going to advance, or they might make $1 or might lose $1 at the beginning, and they expect to see those immediate results.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and exactly true. And I'm going to link that to one final concept, which I think it's important to understand that sort of fear of loss, so that when you are making decisions, you have to like know that this isn't an irrational feeling. I have to like actively do something against that.
Sure.
And the other concept that I think relates is that in the long run, there is never economic profit. So economic profit, when you're running a firm, sort of a business, it includes like opportunity costs. So basically, someone might jump into a business and suddenly they're like raking in the cash, right? And what happens when like someone's raking in money is other people then get into that business and it becomes harder. So in the long run, people are going to enter in the market. There's going to be more competition. You're not going to make more money. So maybe then you're on to that next thing. I always think of like fidget spinners, which are kind of stupid.
They're so fun.
But they like came out. Someone probably made a fortune off of them, but then they're like everywhere, right?
Yeah.
You can buy them all over the place, all sorts of different prices. No one's making huge money on them. When we say economic profit or economic loss, it doesn't always mean cash profit or loss. It includes opportunity costs. So like, you might be better off doing something else to earn more money. But in the end, when you really understand that there's no economic profit, it makes you feel better. So you're always on that margin trying to like find that thing that's going to keep you kind of ahead of the pack. But if you're going to do awesome, if you're the best cookie maker and everyone wants your cookies, guess what's going to happen? Someone else is going to make cookies and try to sell them next to you. And we watch that with different trends that are happening. So you need to always, know that you're on the forefront of that. You need to keep marketing, keep fighting in those margins, and then keep adapting and changing to try to stay ahead.
I wanted to make a crypto joke, but then I realized that stocks are not a bad example of that. Of someone like that's never done stocks, but anytime I'm like, man, I'm going to get into stocks, it's because someone's like, you have to get into this. You should have got into Bitcoin. You should have got into these things, but you need to be the one that kind of sees where that trend is going. That's where you make your money. It's not by jumping in at the end once that fad or trend's already hit its peak. But
it's true. And that's also like, again, this stuff plays out in those markets as well. And like, basically nobody beats the average long term.
Sure.
So you get, crypto bros rolling up in their Lambos or whatever. And then suddenly they're completely bankrupt because they lost everything.
Yeah.
And, stocks, NFTs, they're all like secondary markets and trading. So, but at the end of the day, it's really hard to consistently beat the average. Yeah. So if you're like above average in a year, take that win, right? You're probably not consistently going to do it because nobody has. Mm-hmm. And when people think they do, like math usually tells them that they don't. And that's why, investing in like index funds is sometimes just the best way to go. You lose the highs and lows, but if you're always average return, then you're going to kind of beat everyone in the long run. So same type of thing. And then there's lots of games going on there as well. Right?
Yeah.
Like if I buy something super low and it goes really high, I want to find some sucker who's just discovering this, who's going to try to buy it and then from me at the high mark and then go. So you got the Elon Musk sort of pump and dump strategies of all these things. Like that's just preying on people's biases or human behavior who aren't rational beings. But again, another final thought is people aren't rational. So don't assume they are rational and just keep trying stuff.
Nice.
All right. We'll wrap that up there. So if you want to talk about this more, we'd love to do that. You can catch us at Thrive every Monday morning at 8:30 for coffee with other business owners and entrepreneurs. You could also check out our website at kawarthasmallbusinesspodcast.ca. See how we can help you start, grow, or recharge your business. Or skip all that. Just send us an email to set it up at kawarthasmallbusinesspodcast.ca.